So Ben, welcome to The Unmaking. Where are we parked and why?
Thanks, John. It's very exciting to be here, actually. This is my very first ever podcast. So, yeah, podcast virgin until now. We're down at Glendew Bay at the Mount Aspiring Tititea car park lookout. We're just beyond that on the beach. And I think this place is just sublime for coming out of town and just getting amongst the mountains and the view of Tititea that you can't usually see in town.
And I think you said you like to stop here regularly if you are driving past, just to sort of say hello and take a moment.
Totally, yeah. If I'm in a hurry, it's always just to slow down and just just cause a bit of backlog with the traffic and just cruise by just to take it in. It is world class down here, and before we started we were just on the beach and there's no one here. And I think if this was anywhere else in the world, we'd have hordes of people and crowds and things. And I'm hopefully not going to spoil it with lots of people coming here now, but it's special, And not being from this country, I don't want to ever take that for granted. So I think it's the reason I stop and have a look.
You've lived in plenty of other places, though. Have you had similar, totems that you've had in those places where you have taken a moment to go and, look at things and appreciate where you are? Why?
Yeah, so, from the UK originally, and I've been in New Zealand 13-ish years now. And within New Zealand, I've been in Nelson and Taranaki. And I think the thing that drew me to New Zealand is also the thing that I probably use as a totem in those places, and it's generally the mountains, the ocean, and the outdoors. My draw to coming to this country was for all the beauty that it has outside, and I think there are just key points in each of these places, like mountains, that would probably hold that for me.
And is the taproot going in here, or do you think this could still also be a stopover in a journey to somewhere else?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm someone who's known for having itchy feet, and I've been in Wanaka now for about 7 years, I think. And I like to explore, but Wanaka has something very special for me, and it's all linked to actually the first time I came here. And that was, like I said, about 13 years ago. I was on a tour bus, touring around the country, never been to New Zealand before. I was on a working holiday visa and got down to Wanaka with some friends that I'd made on the way by this point. And I'll never forget stopping in town, hopping off the bus and looking around, and had this overwhelming feeling of home. And that's a really weird way to describe something, I think, because I can't actually articulate it any way other than a feeling of home. And I remember saying to the people I was with, I'm going to live here one day. I need to live here. I need to move here. And they thought I was crazy because we were, working holiday, and how are you going to get a visa? How are you going to get a job here? What are you going to do? And it took me, a few years of living in New Zealand to make it happen, but I've travelled south eventually from Taranaki, Nelson, and then in Wanaka, and here I am. And it's that feeling of home for me, that connection, is something that I never even had back in England. So it tells me that while I do have itchy feet, I'm probably going to be sticking around.
I think you also had itchy feet as a kid. From what I've read about your childhood, it sounds like you weren't someone that perhaps school was or traditional school systems were designed for. What were you looking for back then that the classroom couldn't provide for you?
Oh God, if my mum was sitting here, she'd probably have lots to say about my level of itchy feet and trying to keep up with me. I think I was a handful, I think is the word she would probably use on a podcast. I've just always liked running around doing things. I've always been very active. If someone points something out, and this happened recently, we were bizarrely down in Jackson's Bay, and someone pointed out something on the end of the jetty, just out of curiosity. And for them, it was just curiosity, but for me, I had to actually go down there and check it out and tinker and see what it looked like and what's the view like from there. And that was my childhood. So for someone like me to do a traditional westernized classroom environment for a topic that wasn't overly inspiring for me was challenging. And I think that's the nuance, because what I've learnt about myself over the years is that if there's an academic situation for something that draws me in, then I'm all in. I will be committed to that and be able to sit still and everything else. But learning about Pythagoras theory, and I think my GCSE history was the American West, and it just didn't really appeal to me back then. So I often found myself going off on adventures or doing extracurricular activities around the school that didn't involve me sitting in a classroom.
I think you talk about the family camera, and that you were quite keen once you got your finger on the shutter, the button, that you'd be basically launching through that whole film. Was that something that you just basically you wanted to just keep on shooting, or you didn't really understand the economics of photography at that point, and perhaps taking more time to take a single shot rather than shooting off a whole bunch of the same thing?
So we weren't like a rich family or a flash or anything like that. We had an old school film, 35mm film camera. Didn't have video cameras, but I remember the joy I got from taking pictures, even if they weren't anything that I'd really curated. The joy of actually getting them printed, and I think that's the thing we maybe lose with digital, isn't it? Taking to the shop, not knowing what your photo is going to look like, and then the anticipation and getting this photo and going, that's actually really kind of cool. And the photos were often with people, my family in them, and they're that moment frozen in time, and they just hold a lot of memories to them. But I never, you talk about the economics, I never really, I guess, connected the dots with taking photos for fun, and what that can feel for you can lead into other things in life. This is a conversation I've had actually quite recently with my partner about when you're at school, or when I was at school anyway, you were given these career days, and they were very much designed about, okay, what's your grades in which subjects, and what would that translate to in a career? Like, what would you be good at doing for most of your life, Monday to Friday? And I think we completely ignore what makes you happy. Like, what do you want to do with your life that brings you joy? And I think it was only later in life that I've probably really made that connection. And I like to think that the way that education is going these days is that we actually encourage that train of thought, rather than be quite A to B to C, and
Because I think at that time for you decided to study computing, I think, which sounds like a pretty pragmatic decision, knowing what you do now. How have those sorts of decisions ended when you've made those pragmatic decisions? Have they ended well? Looking back, do you say, "Yep, that was the right thing, age and stage"? Or
so I think everything I've done has led me to where I am now. And I'm grateful and happy for where I am now. So to say that I would want to do something different, it would be interesting, because where would I be? But yeah, back then, it was was it even the 2000s, just about, I think, and the internet was kind of growing, and we hadn't had social media. We didn't really even have Wi-Fi, and computing seemed like the obvious choice to go into. But it was a logic-based decision. It wasn't born out of passion. I'm good with computers. I'm naturally good with tech. I understand it, and that may be part of my history as well with what I've learnt. But it was always just a stepping stone to, I need to get a job. What's a good industry to be in? Computers seem like a good pathway right now. So that's what formed that decision, which ultimately took a hard left turn.
As they often do, those sorts of pragmatic decisions, particularly career decisions, right?
Yeah.
And I think it as a teenager as well, you were in a serious car accident, and were surprised at the take charge person that popped their head up in yourself in that situation. Why were you surprised by that? Was that something that just hadn't exhibited itself at all in your personality?
Yeah, so that was the hard left. That was, or actually, pun not intended, the hard right. But I was going through computing. I was in college, and I just got my driver's license. And I was with some friends driving. We went to see a movie one night in Brighton, on the south of England. Most people will know it or have been there or heard of it. And I was young and dumb, and I was driving incredibly fast with my friends. It was all fun and games at the time. And then a drink driver pulled out on me. And being so inexperienced and driving so fast, I crashed into a parked car on the other side of the road at such a velocity that I actually managed to shunt that car up onto the pavement. And all four of us in the car were unconscious at the time of the crash. And even now it's hard to kind of think back to that. It was one of the darkest moments of my life, because the girl who was sitting behind me, unbeknown to me, wasn't wearing a seatbelt. And she had actually come forward, and I came around from being unconscious to her head kind of in my lap, and she wasn't moving. And in that moment, I was absolutely adamant that I had killed my friend. And everything was ringing in my ears. The airbags had gone off. There was smoke in the car. And in that moment, there was, in some ways, almost no thought as to what to do, but yet I knew what to do. And my friend in the front seat next to me was coming around, and he got himself out of the vehicle, and I had gone round to get my friend behind me, check on her, get her out of the vehicle, and farmer carried her to the side of the road, like well clear of where the crash was, to make sure it was safe in case something set on fire. She luckily came around, but had a massive leg injury, which at night I again went straight into somehow knowing what to do, and tourniqueted her leg with my clothes, and did that initial triage, got everyone that's safe, went back to the car, secured the car. And at the point that everyone was okay, I was standing in the road and I collapsed. And I think the adrenaline had obviously just done its thing, and my purpose in that moment was done. And the next thing I remember is being carried by a firefighter into an ambulance. And, the rest is history from that side of things. But yeah, it's interesting, having just said a few minutes ago about not regretting your past decisions that have led you here, but that is definitely one that I will carry with me. And everyone's fine nowadays, but yeah.
It's interesting that your memories are also so clear from that, because often then your body will jump in, and particularly in that where you're really on autopilot, and it sounds almost like an out-of-body experience that you're having, that your body will say, oh, this is too traumatic. I'm just going to blank this a little bit so you can't remember. I've been in a car accident similar age, late teenage, and I don't remember anything. I remember being in the car heading down the road, and the next minute, standing on the side of the road, but I didn't lose consciousness at all, but there's just no memory of the impact and the immediate aftermath. And so looking back, and then that was then, okay, this is really interesting, I'm good at this. Where's the best place to apply these skills or to develop them further? Or was that then part of your thinking then to go in the career direction that you did?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't an immediate thought. There was a lot of psychological recovery that I had to go through. I couldn't even, driving back from the hospital the following morning with my parents in the car, I was terrified to even be a passenger in a car for about 6 months. It was really, really hard for me. And getting back to driving again, had to go and have lessons again, because I was absolutely terrified that I was going to hurt myself or someone else. I was convinced of it. And through the investigation process with police for the crash, there was kind of an evolution of understanding about myself. And my dad was there during those police interviews where they came to my house, and it almost organically developed into this conversation with the police officer and my dad and me about, well, where, depending on the outcome of this investigation, what would Ben's opportunities, chances be of, joining the police? And I don't know whether that conversation was a result of the outcome of the investigation, which, I didn't get an actual conviction at all. It was, I don't know if they looked at my age and took that all into consideration, but or the drink driver, I don't know. But for everything that came out of that, I ended up joining the police at a very young age, and that taught me to grow up very quickly. As you can imagine, you're going into some pretty sketchy situations, and I'm not sure I do now, but I've always been called Junior for the way I look, and when I joined the police I looked about 12. So you're going into the people's houses, kind of telling them what needs to be done, and they're looking back at you going, should you be here? Have you borrowed that uniform from someone? So it was a big learning curve to suddenly grow up and step out into the world.
You're obviously very good at it. You counter-terrorism, organised crime. You became one of the youngest tactical flight officers in the country. So in terms of those sort of skill sets that you had and have been able to apply it, that sort of thing, were you aware at the time that, hey, I'm really good at this, but it doesn't quite fit? Or did it really feel like it fit at the time?
I think reflecting on my childhood and not being able to sit still so much and always having to have something going on for me, the police work that I ended up getting into, because I had certain attributes with the way I can communicate and the fact that I didn't look like a police officer led me into those specialist areas. It was always dynamic. Every single day we were around the southeast of the country, doing some fun things, and helicopter then developed towards the end of my career in the UK, and that was several years flying around in a police helicopter and doing the kind of counter-terrorism stuff on the side of that. And it was good in a way that they would almost just let you work every single day with no days off, but work-life balance took a hit through that period. But I was loving it. It was fun, it was adventurous, and I got to see and do some things that you almost couldn't imagine. Sometimes it's quite funny.
You must have had some pretty traumatic, or been exposed to some quite traumatic situations as part of that. Was that something that you found relatively easy to deal with and process, or was that I just keep moving, there's always going to be tomorrow and something new, and to take your mind off things or to distract you?
Oh, yeah. God, that's opening up Pandora's box, isn't it? So when I was maybe my first 6 months of being on the beat, so you do, before I got into the specialist units, you obviously have a period of community street cop, and I think it was in the first 6 months, so I'm 18, and I went to my first homicide, and Marie Harding, still remember her name, had been, bless her, she'd been stabbed, and it was really traumatic. She was unconscious but still alive when I found her. And to go through that as an 18-year-old was huge, and I didn't really appreciate how much it would potentially affect me. And there's obviously interventions in place where you go to an incident like that, and there's enforced help that you have to go and speak to someone and kind of debrief. But there was a number of things, having a gun pointed at me for the first time and someone holding a hatchet over my head. Like, these are things that now I talk about, and I have such, I guess, a mental resilience to things like that. But you speak to someone who hasn't been in that situation and they look at you wide-eyed going, you're mental? Why are you almost smiling about these experiences? But they callous your mind, and they give you this resilience that I guess continues for the rest of your life, which is why some things now, when they feel stressful, I laugh it off and I'm like, well, no one's chasing me with a knife right now. What's the worst that can happen?
The helicopter work you mentioned, it gave you a lot of time, like many hundreds of hours operating like a gimbal and things like that. Did you see that as just a purely technical task that you were performing, or was that really a creative work or role?
Yeah, I mean, flying with the helicopter cameras, and I was never looking at framing it as something cinematic, different to how I would frame something now. It was very, follow the car, follow the person, give a jury a context of a scene from above. But I was good at the multitasking. So when you were a crewman on the police helicopter that I was on, we had a pilot, a paramedic, and the flight officer. That was me. And when you do a medical job, you become the second paramedic, and then police jobs, you're obviously doing the police things. So you're navigating, you're operating through your radios, you're on a camera, you're checking airspace, you're communicating in the cockpit. It was very full on, but it was something that I found I was good at. And operating the camera, I was always able to kind of almost visualize the edit, which, as I'd say it now, of like, okay, this is going to look this way. What else do people need to see in this footage? So you'd frame the image to give that context, which, is a different kind of creative, I guess.
I think you've recently started to better rationalize or understand that those earlier careers and work, and how that's enabled your success in film around communication and how to understand people's stories. What shifted for you in that conversation? Are you fully on board with believing it, or is this still a work in progress to understand how these things have led to where you are now and what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I would be the first to say that I'm always a work in progress myself. I don't think you ever reach an end point in career or your personal growth. But it was so he's a new friend, and we met in Queenstown, and I joked with him at the time, he's like a brother from another mother. We've lived in separate countries all our life, but have had a crossover with our experiences, and how we see the world is quite similar. And I was very drawn to him, and we had this conversation, and I opened up about my past, and I was like, I don't really share too much of it because, I don't want to be, seen as my past. I want to be seen as who I am now. And he was like, oh yeah, but what did that give you? What was that able to, or what were you able to learn from those years doing policing? And no one's ever asked me that before. And it honestly stopped me dead. And I was like, that's interesting. It was giving me an understanding of people's stories. Like you meet new people every single day, lots of them potentially, and you have to take what they're telling you, interpret the story, and go from there. And then you've got to communicate back to them, and you've got to gain their trust, and you've got to be able to be the person that they're willing to open up to and tell you their story. And I was like, it gave me that, and gave me obviously the resilience to take on like pressured situations and pivot a lot in a moment's notice. And as we kept talking, all these things kept coming out, and he was prompting me, kind of was helping me unwrap this, which was really kind of him. And since then, and that was only a month ago, since then it's actually almost given me this new perspective, and coincided with you reaching out and us doing this podcast. And I think I probably should be more cognizant of my past and how it's informed my skills that I take for granted now. So when we're doing film work and I have to interview someone, and I need them to just ignore the camera, ignore the microphones, and talk to me, and maybe get emotional, or maybe I'm wanting to get emotion from them, I find that easy for me. I like people, and people seem to like opening up. And I think part of that is probably based on seeing people in their worst possible moments, and sitting down with them and saying, hey, what's happened?
Because when people do find out about your previous life and careers, I think the uniform reaction is kind of shock, horror, disbelief, surprise. Well, why do you think that is? Why do you think people are so surprised that, this guy used to be a cop? What do you think is behind that?
So there's two lines that always come out, And the first line is, "What? You're way too nice to be a cop." And I was like, well, that's the way it should be, but no, I understand why you'd say that. And the other one is, you don't look like a cop. You look too friendly and too warm and too happy to be a cop, which, you know, says something about me, which is great, but I think unfortunately probably says something about the state of our legal systems around the world, potentially. You know, I understand that there's a time to be in charge, 100%, been there, but I think it's probably more important to start from a place of openness and communication.
It's interesting, I think, the police. I had the privilege / pleasure of training a bunch of undercover detectives, teaching them English when I was first living in Germany. And probably 50% of them, regardless of what they were wearing or what they were doing or where I would encounter them, I would have immediately gone, yep, cop. But the other half, less so. And I'd be interested to know, I mean, this was 20 years ago, how many of those people are still in the force and from that proportion, or whether those things have changed.
Yeah, because there is that stereotype, isn't there? You can look at someone and go, yeah, you look like a cop, and I don't know what it is that gives that impression, but I never get people assuming that. I always give them the opportunity. They go, oh, what did you used to do? And I say, okay, take what I do now, very creative, and flip it on its head. What is a very black and white rule driven kind of here's your handrails job that you could do? And people usually say accountant. So I've never been an accountant, don't know if that's accurate, but no one ever guesses that I used to be in the police, which is, I take that as a pat on the back.
So 29, you sold your camera and said, okay, I'm off, coming to New Zealand. What were you leaving versus what were you moving towards? Where were you at that point?
So yes, I was 29 and the itchy feet was screaming. It was so loud. I was comfortable. Like, things were great. I was in a helicopter flying around doing these fun things. I had a roof over my head, had an income. In the UK, when you sign up to the police over there, you signed up for 30 years. So you know your start date and your end date, and then you get a pension. So your life is kind of mapped out. And that gives you security, and that's great. That's fine. But I guess the nature of that career, I was surrounded by people who were much older than me, and there was a lot of people who were a little bit of a cynic, or they were just unhappy, and I didn't want to ever get to that stage where I don't want to go to work, or something's beating me down, and the system or whatever it is. And I was like, okay, if I don't do something like soon, that's my pathway. I'm gonna be a mirror of that. I was like, okay, well, what do I do? And somewhere along the line, and there's lots of like micro stories within that, but I basically ended up selling my camera to fund a one-way ticket to New Zealand, a country that I'd never been to, that I had Googled once and thought, wow, look at those mountains, I want to go there. And that was it. I sold pretty much everything I owned, much to my mum's dismay. And she was saying, oh, Ben, are you sure you're not going to need these things when you come back? I was like, I know what you're doing, Mum, but yeah. I don't think I'll be needing them again. And that was it. I came here, one-way ticket, and landed in Auckland, which was interesting for the first couple of nights I was there. There was, I think it was like a stabbing across the road or something, and I was next door to a brothel, and I remember having a conversation with my sister on the phone. I was like, I might as well come back to England, because it's just like, it's the same, but at least in England I have a job. And she was like, no, wait it out. And I'm really grateful for that phone call with her, because she was like, just get on the bus tomorrow, go and see the rest of the country, and then just take it day by day. And that's what I did. And I think within New Zealand, there's always the joke about once you get south of the Bombays, the world changes. It's probably a bit more developed nowadays. But that was it for me. We started to drive south, and then I saw what I would define as the real New Zealand of why I came here. And that was just the vast outdoors and the beauty and, you know, mountains and volcanoes and wildlife that, you know, I've not been exposed to before. And people, my God, I love the people. Like, Kiwis are awesome. Yeah, they just are. And they are a massive part of wanting to stay here.
So you travelled around, you checked out the country, and then how did you end up in Taranaki then at that point?
Yeah, so I probably made it sound a bit more reckless than it actually was coming out here, but I did put some feelers out before leaving and hopping on a plane. And because I was doing helicopter work in the police, I reached out to the rescue helicopter service around the country. I know at the time I think there was like 18 different bases, pretty much all individually run as a trust. And quite a few of them were interested to meet, talk about potential work. And it just so happened that the first one on my travels that coincided with where I was at the time was Taranaki in New Plymouth. So I remember going in there and had a coffee with the team and met the training officer there at the time, a guy called Jaden Strickland, who I'm still friends with now. And there was a job coming up. And it was almost like the universe was like, here you go. You know, like there's an opportunity, you've got to work for it, and there's other people going for the same job, but you know, there's something there. And ultimately got the job, and then I was a rescue helicopter crewman up there for a couple of years, doing again some fun, wild adventures, winching people off the top of Mount Taranaki who thought it was a good idea to go up in gumboots, or jandals. People would have their jandals and then ring us because their jandal was snapped, climbing a mountain. And you're like, what are you doing? Like,
Equipment failure.
Yeah. So anyway, lots of fun things. The marine rescues, they were at the pointy end of what we did there, because you're winching someone out of a moving environment, and the pilot has to work extremely hard to generally point out towards the ocean, so their visual references are pretty limited. And I'm hanging out the door. They call it conning, where you direct the aircraft up, down, forwards, backwards, and the pilot puts complete trust in your direction. So if you tell him to go down 10, he will go down 10. And you just have to be really on your game. And when there's swell and waves coming in, you've got someone in the water who's, you know, drowning effectively, and you've got to pick them up with a rescue swimmer. It's full on, but I love that. It's what I really thrived on.
Was there any cultural difference between the work and the type of work? With things a little more, I mean, I'm imagining that perhaps in New Zealand sometimes things are a little bit fast and loose when it comes to rules, regulations, and particularly in a high stress situation where it's about saving someone's life, and there may be certain steps and protocols that you normally would be followed, but or was it pretty much 100% one-to-one?
I think no. So I very quickly in New Zealand learnt the term "she'll be right," and still use that to this day. But no, when it came to the real pointy end stuff, like you can't put you going and doing search and rescue in an aircraft. Usually you're doing it when the weather's really marginal or terrible, because that's when other people need extra help. So you're already pushing the envelope with safety, and I'm using that term in inverted commas because we are still being safe. We're working in parameters that we know we can operate in, and if shit hits the fan, we can extricate ourselves without anyone getting hurt. But you go up to that line. If someone's in trouble, you do absolutely everything that you can, up to the point where you just don't make their emergency become your emergency.
Did you feel that when you were here that it was familiar in terms of the type of work that you were doing, but it was sort of familiar yet foreign, or did you feel sort of further from yourself than before, or closer because of the environment was different? How did you feel at that point?
So when I made the decision to leave the UK, it was a very clear decision for me. I was very at peace with it. I had said goodbye to all my friends. We're still connected. The world's a small place with the internet now. Saying goodbye to family was very hard, and again, we connect online, but not seeing them face to face is hard. So I was really okay with being somewhere completely new, and I was very open to it, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, my mindset was very like, let's just do everything. Obviously there's huge differences between the UK and here. They're two islands at the other side of the planet, but environmentally, culturally, very different here. England's history with our colonization goes back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. We're a mishmash of parts of Europe, probably a bit of Africa, Scandinavia in there as well. It's all blended in, whereas the history in New Zealand is so much fresher, and I think because of that, I think that's why it's so much more conversational. But I love that there is that different element of culture here. Place names is probably the biggest thing that told me that I was in a foreign place when we'd be flying to a place called Whangamomana. Trying to spell that one for the first time, or say it, was good fun. But yeah, I like to think that I embrace New Zealand for New Zealand. I'm a Kiwi now. I have a passport, but I still came to this country as a visitor.
And what came after Search and Rescue?
Yeah, so Search and Rescue was a couple of years in, and my sister, by this point, who's my only sibling, had actually moved out to Nelson with her family.
Your poor parents.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we do love you guys, I promise. But she moved out with her family, husband, 2 kids, my niece and nephew, to Nelson. Her husband had a job, so they were all tickety-boo. And I wanted to be able to move closer to her, to be nearer to her, and also to have a bit of flexibility to see this country. I'm in this new place. I want to see it. I want to explore. And the shift work at the rescue helicopter was tough. You were 96 hours working. So you were in the office or in the base from office hours, like 9 to 5, but then you were on call for the entirety of the day. So these 96 hours, a couple of days, 2.5 days off, we had to be back in. So what would predominantly happen is you do your base days, because the requirements for deployment were so much shorter in your call time. So you had to be there by the aircraft. And then when you go home, and of course, people don't usually call for help until they really, really need it. So the sun goes down at 7, 8 o'clock at night, pager goes off, you go back in. So you'd end up doing these huge days. And then middle of the night, you get called out. And it was just really hard. And I could feel that it was something that almost presented an element of risk if I was going to be fatigued doing that job long term. So, new country, and somewhat naively actually rejoined the police. And
in Nelson.
In Nelson. And that was, again, born out of wanting to move around the country and being near my sister. Do I say in hindsight, maybe that chapter of my life I probably should have just let go in England. But again, I think I became so institutionalized by my time in the UK doing that job that you actually forget that there's something completely outside of public sector. And the thought of doing something that wasn't either search and rescue or, a public service, effectively, was really foreign to me. So because, I left college and went into the police and didn't do a degree, I had this mindset of, I think you probably need to go to university to do something bigger, better, whatever, which I now know is completely not true. And rejoined the police, did some time in Nelson, and ultimately then moved down to Wanaka off the back of that, whilst still doing whilst the photo and video kind of passion was actually building in the background at the same time. So having sold my camera to move to New Zealand, I bought another one, and then it was the dawn of action cameras, so that made video really accessible, and I started just goofing around. Again, it was just that passion that this is fun. I like doing this. So I did, and I'd never at that time made the connection to, hey, you can do this for a career. It took me to be paid for a gig to go, wait, what? You're going to pay me? This is really weird. And then it coincided with a film festival at the same time in the States, had seen one of my really, really stupid videos online and said, oh, can we use this as an interlude between a couple of films? My first response was like, hell no. I edited that on my phone. It's awful. It's amateur. And they were like, no, but it's really funny and goofy and we like it. So I was like, okay, fair enough. And that was the start. That was the light bulbs, like, what am I doing this job that, yes, I can do, but ultimately isn't making me happy, when really the thing that makes me happy I've been doing all along, just in the background.
What would you say to a young police officer then, a cop whose uniform's perhaps feeling a little too constricting or tight? What advice would you have for them from a creativity and self-expression perspective? Because I imagine, being in an institution like that, that's not really encouraged, or at least it wasn't in the past. I think it's more so now, and certainly I've seen from some of the things like recruiting videos that the New Zealand police have been doing over the last few years. I would say, wow, that looks really interesting. Whether or not that reflects the reality inside the force is perhaps a different thing. I've certainly had that experience where a corporation told me, oh, this is exactly the sort of person we're looking for, someone who questions everything. No, they weren't. They weren't looking for that sort of person at all, but that was what they thought they were. So how do you see that?
Yeah, I'm gonna temper my answer a little bit on this. I think if I was going to speak to that person who's in that job, then they know what it's like. And as simplistic as it is, and I know it's not a click your fingers and it will happen, but do what makes you happy. And if something is making you unhappy, then move towards the happiness faster. And I get that that's a journey, and it took me years and years to get where I am. But do one thing next week, one thing next month that moves you towards that goal. Research something that interests you, talk to someone, connect with someone, visit a place, because life is too short not to be fully happy. Because I think about my deathbed a lot, and I know that's a little bit morbid, but I don't think we talk about death as much as we should do. It's the only guarantee. We're born and then we die, and I don't want to be on my deathbed in whatever, however that looks, going, oh, I wish I had X, or if I'd just done Y. Like that keeps me up at night.
No regrets.
Yeah. So, and that's it. Like, we're all a product of our past environment and our history. Like, we totally are. But I think if you're in the present moment and something's on your mind and your gut is telling you, I think we don't listen to our gut enough. Your gut is telling you something isn't right here, I'm not entirely fulfilled. Then, explore other options that could make you happier. Yeah, I'm not telling someone to do a reflex and just like
chuck it all in.
Yeah, throw something across the room and say I'm out, and don't let the door hit you on the way out. But I think pursue what makes you happy.
So you're self-taught. I know you struggle a little bit with that imposter syndrome still, that it's still there. Do you think that would be different if you'd gone through a more formal path of qualification, or sort of that whole apprenticeship kind of thing, just starting at the very, very bottom, going to fetch cigarettes and coffees and whatever it is, and working your way up through that food chain?
Yeah, I think imposter syndrome is so interesting. And I used to think it was just something that creatives had, and that's not true from what I've kind of learned from speaking to people. And something else that's kind of made me, I guess, happy in a way is I actually heard a podcast with it was either like James Cameron or Steven Spielberg, like the top of the top, and they were reciting this time recently where they walked onto a set and they had no idea what to do. And they were like, oh God, I'm so out of my depth. I'm so glad there's a whole crew around me who can just do all the things. And my assistant director can just like put some paper in front of me and go, are you good with this? Yep, that looks good. And then go with the day. So I think so many people get this imposter syndrome and maybe just don't know what it is. It's that gut feeling sometimes, or it's something that keeps you up at night. But coming into my kind of creative life through an unconventional way, actually these days doesn't seem that unconventional. I'm trying to think locally, out of all the creatives I know, the vast majority of them had not done a conventional, film school approach. And I don't know whether that's just a thing from this side of the world or not. But I think it also leans into the type of work I do, focusing on kind of the documentary world versus something like scripted features, which you'd see maybe more in Auckland or Wellington, where people have kind of come up the ranks and they've done a certain job title like a camera assistant, and they've stayed a camera assistant for X years before then developing into be a camera operator and then maybe a cinematographer beyond that. So yeah, being self-taught, I mean, I like it. I really love that I can do multiple things, and in this environment in Wanaka we quite often have to, because of the projects we do, or for me focusing on my work in the wilderness areas and mountains especially, you have to be able to carry a camera and think about sound and, how are we composing this? Do we need lighting? Is it possible to get lighting where we are? Do we need, do you need hair makeup? Do you need some sort of catering? Or is it just throw some brownies in your backpack and away we go? So I think the non-conventional way, I don't think is anything to do with imposter syndrome. I think imposter syndrome for me is just my drive to want to do more and do better and always be better and learn from others and from myself to improve my craft.
How do you deal with outside or external validation then? So when you get positive feedback or you win a prize or you're commended for some good aspects of your work, is that something that sits really comfortably with you? Do you see that as genuine, or is there still a kind of, I think they're just being nice, or I got lucky, or that was a sort of a fluke? Not sure if I'm going to be able to replicate that.
No, I don't think I read into it that much. I think, so I've won awards for some of my films and I've got into some really great festivals, and I don't think you would, no one's doing that just to, they don't know you from Adam. No one's doing that to go, he's got a nice profile picture, he seems like a nice dude, we'll give him an award. So that tells me that I'm doing the right thing, and that just adds fuel to the fire to that's great. Awards, who doesn't want to get an award? It's not always the sole purpose for wanting to create. The purpose for me to create is still about creating something that evokes emotion, whether that's visually or through the story or audibly. It's creating a connection to other humans that other humans can watch and feel something.
You've said that story is really important to you, but also technical execution. How do you balance those two things? Is one in the driver's seat? They need to be hand in hand? How do you handle that?
It's a balance, for sure. It's a balance. Yeah. I think story will always trump technical. I think we do get focused in this consumerist world of must have this camera or this is better than that. I think we're actually in a place with technology where you can make such an acceptable piece of work, and if the story beneath it is great, then it's great. We've just had the New Zealand Mountain Film Festival here. It's been going for over 20 years, and one of the award-winning films was shot on a phone, the whole thing. And it was a guy who set a new record climbing all the 50 peaks across America. And he's a Kiwi, and the previous record holder set the Guinness record, or the fastest known time, using a private jet and flew between the states and did all. It was very glam. And then old mate Kiwi comes along, gets his dad in not even a camper van, just like a big car that he could sleep in the back of, and they drove between the states and climbed these peaks. And he set this new Guinness World Record and shot it on his phone, and it just made for such a great story. So you don't need You don't always need the tech. Of course, sometimes high-end commercials, they require certain things to look a certain way. But I think story is important, especially in the dawn of AI, and, well, probably not in the dawn anymore, are we? We're kind of emerging even more. But that's something that AI is never going to be able to replicate, is human stories. So from a documentarian perspective, I think that you'll still need humans to tell those stories, because, like I say, other people want to see other people.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most interesting viewpoints I've heard on AI was from Rick Rubin, talking about how if you've got a film script and you give that film script to the 5 LLMs, you will get the same product back, basically, or the same film back. But you give that script to 5 of the world's best directors, you will get 5 completely different films, because AI doesn't have a perspective in that thing, whereas those individual directors do, and they bring their perspective to a creative project, which I think is an interesting approach.
100%. And, AI is not going anywhere. Like, we're all certain of that, and it will grow, and it's going to evolve. But even I just don't see it in the future. I may be wrong. I may just be at a place where I cannot imagine it, but I can't see that AI will be able to have the same emotional connection and, like you say, perspective that humans can. And because of that, I think there'll always be a need for humans to tell the stories. AI will help, of course. It can break down an interview and tell you key points and themes, but it can't hear at the moment, can't hear like the inflections in the voice, can't hear the emotion. It can't hear actually something on audio is actually much deeper than it is for the written word, if that makes sense. When that person is actually opening up, they might be saying something really quite flat on script, but if a human heard that, they might feel something.
Photography and film both still coexist. Do you see one dropping back further? Is this something that you want to continue with both? How are you approaching those?
Yeah, I mean, I majority of my work is film based. There's things are moving so fast that, there's some crazy stats, aren't there, at the moment, where someone who's in school right now, by the time they're 40, will experience hundreds of years of technical evolution in 1 year. And so I don't actually think we can comprehend right now quite what the future's going to look like. I think it is a day by day thing, and very soon, day by day, is going to change a lot. And I think we need to just be gentle with ourselves, actually, across all industries, across life, because life is going to get or feel like it's moving quickly. And I think as humans, we're not used to that. We're receiving more information in our brains now than we ever have across history. And I think we need to just be gentle with ourselves and give ourselves some grace.
If I look back across your body of work, regardless of what it is, there's sort of your physical capability doesn't really seem to be particularly separate from what you're doing creatively. Is that part of the thing of having the itchy feet and needing to push yourself to the absolute extremes physically, and to combine that then with your work, that you need that? So you need to be shooting in the outdoors. You wouldn't be happy going to a soundstage every day.
Yeah, I think where I found myself is probably where I need to be. And you're right, yeah, if I had to shoot in the studio every day, I would, I'd see the creativity in that, of course, and you'd make it what you can. But there's not many people, I'm learning, that can do what I do in the hills, or in the outdoors, or on the trails, or whatever, with a camera and the talent, the story, in the hills. I love pushing myself physically. Years ago, I kind of got into triathlon quite heavily in the UK and went down that path, and then moving to New Zealand, I was like, oh my God, I don't need to train on the road anymore. There are these things called trails, and you have mountains that we can go up. So that kind of gave me the natural evolution of, all right, how far and fast can I go up a mountain? I got into ultramarathons. Before COVID, I was competing and taking that quite seriously. And then COVID obviously killed off all of the events all around the place, and that was my kind of like, okay, that's my chapter done. I'm ready to just do it for fun now. So still run up mountains, still do these fun things and crazy things, but they're for me now, not for chasing a time or a position on the scoreboard.
If I look at your films, there's often an element of really, stripping back, peeling back layers to get to the real core person, somebody at their most raw, most vulnerable. Is that also part of what you're looking for personally when you're out doing those sports that are really pushing you to the edge of your limits? To see, okay, what is the real Ben? Is there somebody that you're looking for, that you're hoping to find as part of that process in those sports?
For sure, absolutely, yeah. Like without a doubt, there are totally jobs that I get where you're shooting action, and that's great. And some athletes with what they do is mind blowing. I couldn't do some of these things. Especially around here, we have a lot of winter sports, right? I think per capita we have like one of the highest number of winter Olympic attendees in the world. We punch, we really do. And I watch some of these people, or the mountain biking, or whatever it is, and it's beautiful and amazing. But I want to know, well, how did you get there? Like, what was your childhood like? Tell me how you deal with injury. Like, where does your resilience sit when you think about having to have some downtime, or like if your coach says you need to rest for a week? Like, where does your mind go? How do you deal with that? What are you looking for in the future? Like, all of these things, for me anyway, are more interesting than, okay, great, he just pulled a brand new trick in a half pipe. Like, that's still epic and amazing and great in its own right. But I think beneath that is a much bigger story. And that's what I really like to tap into.
Yeah, I was involved with launching UFC into the German market, and that was really interesting in terms of looking at how to approach that, and really working together with the broadcaster at the time to say, okay, this is not going to be interesting for Germans just to see people just smashing each other. What's going to be interesting is their why, to understand, okay, who is this person? What's their background? Why are they doing this? And if you can, if you understand that, and we've seen that with all those Netflix kind of behind the scenes kind of sports documentaries that then explore things, and suddenly people that thought Formula One was completely boring are now suddenly rabid fans because they've seen behind the curtain, and it's not just a bunch of cars whizzing around the track and who gets first, second or third. There's a lot of other sort of backstories going on there.
Yeah, and it's that thing again, isn't it? Humans want to see other human stories. We're interested. We're kind of societal beings that like to be in a pack, and we can extend that pack by the internet and hearing stories from the other tribe over on the other island, or whatever, the other country. There's so many stories. Everybody has a story. Like, literally everybody has a story. So I want to explore those, because it's I just want to explore those. Yeah.
Well, you do make them interesting. I mean, the adventure of racing, so you shot it solo. This is not something I'm personally interested in. I'm not a fan of endurance sports, but it's not something that interests me. But that story really interests me. It drew me in terms of the challenges that they were facing, and first of all, just getting a team together, an all-women team, and then the setbacks along the way, and then how they got through that. How was that experience for you? Was there a point as part of that project where you thought, okay, I might have bitten off a bit more than I can chew here? I mean, you're humping all your gear on your own through there with an elite endurance sport team. Was there a point, or were there points where you thought, okay, this could go bad?
So yeah, the adventure of racing, that was a great film, and that was one of the ones that did really well and won like best documentary and best film. But my reason for making the film wasn't to seek out those awards. My reason for making it was that, knowing the world of adventure racing, I felt that women-led teams were underrepresented. I even feel that the rules around adventure racing, where you have to have a mixed race team, but you look at any professional team and there are 3 males and 1
Very
female.
tokenist, yeah.
Yeah, and for me that doesn't sit right. That doesn't feel good. So there was a team that was female led, and without spoiling the film, we went and shot them at the Adventure Racing World Championships, which were down in Fiordland a few years ago. And I went out in the field with them and did parts of the race and had to keep up and film and ask questions and produce, through the night. And it was full on. It was definitely at the limit a little bit, because they're racing. Then they're not. It's not like doing a commercial shoot with an athlete in the hills where we have a day to capture some footage and talk about things, where we can go, oh, actually, can you do that again? I just want to, swap a lens out and do something different. Like, they're racing for winning. They weren't waiting for me for a second. So I had to keep up. There was no option. And I remember on one of the big expedition days where I think we were going for like 38 hours or something like that I was awake for. It was my first experience of hallucinating, which was wild. And we'd got to the top of Mount Tititea, just on the edge of Fiordland there, and they were going down one side to get in pack rafts. So because I didn't have a pack raft, I was then going backtracking on the mountain, down the ridge, down into the valley, and back to my car on my own. And I'll never forget, I was walking through this forest on the way back, and it's now like midday or something, like I say, 38 hours awake or more. And I kept seeing animal heads, like full-size bear heads, just looking at me. And I in the moment felt that they were real, but they didn't scare me. I wasn't like, oh God, there's a bear, I better run. I was like, oh look, there's a bear. Oh look at this, it's moving, it looks alive. And then you kind of blink and shake your head, and you go, oh no, that's a tree stump. And then you carry on going, you're like, oh, it's a snake. Oh no, it's a twig. And then there was even a point where I could swear blind. There was a couple, there was two people, I can picture them and everything, and they were taking photos in the bush. And I believed it so much so that I actually called out to them to kind of say, hey, how you doing? How's your day? And I got round the corner, I was like, oh, where did those people go? And I was like, oh shit, yeah, that was another hallucination. So I guess physiologically you could probably argue that that's getting up towards the limit of what you can do, but physically I was still able to run and climb and operate a camera. I was just seeing some animal heads and people taking photos.
So apart from greeting the hallucinations and considering that, what's the inner voice doing in situations like that?
For that time, I was actually thinking about story. So I was like, okay, so we're day whatever into this expedition. This is the footage I've got. This is what people have told me. I know what I've shot in the interviews before the race. Right. So what's going to happen next? Okay, where do I need to meet them? If they're all doing really well, okay, how do I kind of produce that? If they're suffering or if someone's injured, that's a different angle. I've follow that story. So my mind is, I think in those moments, you've got to always be thinking about what's about to happen, because if you were just to react in that documentary kind of phase, you could potentially miss something that you'll maybe need later, and you might regret that in the edit. So it's thinking about the story the whole time.
So you're essentially editing while you're shooting, while you're running, while you're getting from point A to B. Once you're then actually in this edit suite or in that process, what does that look like? How easy do you find that process then, in terms of leaving those things out, those things that particularly that have come at such a high cost, in terms of capturing some of those moments, not all of which are going to make it into your final cut? How are you then, or is your strength actually out there in long term? I've got to find an editor. I hate this part.
Yeah, doing a project. So that one, I made that solely for me. Rab was on board with the project, but I was the sole creator of it at the start for sure. I enjoy editing. I enjoy crafting story. Do I enjoy it as much as being out there talking to people and getting their story from them? Probably not as much. I think that's definitely where my stronger skill set is. I'm not an editor through and through. So for this project, actually lent into some help with a friend of mine, Joe, who's phenomenal with story. And I think the final film was, I think, 26 minutes. My first rough cut was like an hour and a half. And then I think I went to him with about a 50-minute cut, I think. And I was like, right, can you watch this with me and, tear it apart? Because the thing with when you've shot something and you've edited it, you're so in the story that you almost miss things when you watch them, because your mind is playing you the bigger picture of what actually happened. Whereas when you watch it, you can actually go, well, that doesn't make sense because they don't have context. But because you filmed it in your mind, you knew exactly what happened before that. So it's really, really important, I think, to have that external voice to come in and go, nah, or yeah, or change, or maybe just put this somewhere else. So Joe was really cool, and we spent a few sessions together just kind of refining things, and then I'd go back and do some tweaks, and then ultimately, we came out with a 26-minute film.
What role does music play in your life? And obviously it's really important in filmmaking, and particularly in terms of conveying emotion or assisting with emotions and feelings. How has the soundtrack to your life changed through those previous careers and what you do now when you're out and about? Are the genres stayed the same, or have things changed?
Oh, I love music. It's very rare to find me not listening to music. Which is interesting, because if I take myself for a run and don't listen to music, I actually find that it unlocks a lot of creativity in me. But conversely, I also get so much happiness and joy out of running with music, and that I don't want to not listen to it. You made me think of my Spotify like end of year review thing that they send through, and has my taste changed? I've always been very eclectic with my music. Pretty much any music goes. I probably draw the line at like thrash metal at that end of the spectrum, and at the other end, probably the really cheesy poppy stuff, not so much, but anything in between. Yeah, from reggae to rock to 80s, drum and bass. That was a big part of my childhood. I'm pretty open to all music. I love it, and it can creates emotion for a lot of people, and using that appropriately in film is powerful. But something I've actually found in my most recent film that just was on at the film festival here was I actually used less music to get more emotion out, and there maybe be like a sound bed of like a cello, just a one note cello going through. But actually what I've learned is if you use too much music, sometimes you can distract away from the story, and I think you need to balance that. So commercials are very different. They sometimes need to have all this hypey music because they need your attention for the 15, 30, 60 seconds of the advert, and that's usually because the story is very short, or there isn't a story, they're trying to sell you toothpaste or something. But I think for me, for getting emotion, use music or use sounds, but complement what is happening. Don't try and cover up what is happening with music to try and fix something.
And if you're in the car on the way to, or on the way to work to go and winch somebody off the side of a mountain, compared to a sunny day down in central Otago about to go and film something out in nature where it's going to be a nice, enjoyable shoot, is that the same
music
that you're listening to on the trip in, or is that then quite different?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. Did we even listen to music before those jobs? That was too hectic. It was. But when we were doing the winchy stuff, I don't think there was any music. I think my mind was so full, and that's what I mean. It was so dynamic, and there was so many moving parts every second that I don't think my mind actually had any space in it for a little song. But now I listen to music when I'm driving to somewhere. Quite often, if I'm meeting either a client for a brand or an athlete especially, I actually ask them what music they listen to, and I get their playlist, and I'll play that repetitively when I'm planning the shoot, or when I'm going to it, or when I'm editing it, because it's their story, right? So what better way to do that than actually to listen to what they were listening to? There's no point in me listening to something I want to hear. It's going to influence the edit. Yeah, for sure.
Your film Onwards, filming Helene's battle with tongue cancer, it's very intimate in terms of the access and somebody at their their most vulnerable. What does that sort of project do to you compared to some of the other ones that are perhaps have more of a perhaps a predictable script in terms of what you think the outcome's going to be?
Yeah, that I would say is probably the hardest thing I've ever had to film. With Helene. So, yeah, she and she won't mind me speaking about this. She was very open on her social media when she was diagnosed with cancer. And so to put this into context, this is an incredibly fit woman who's a physio, health focused, had came 5th in a 100-mile ultra race weeks before and was then told she had tongue cancer. And, and there's no good cancer, but tongue cancer is not good. It's right in the places you don't want it to be. And I remember building up the guts to approach her because I was interested that she was sharing so much online and I wanted to document the journey. But ultimately the conversation was, well, we're either going to make something that is, supportive and inspirational for people diagnosed with cancer and their families, or we're making a memento for your family. And that it was the hardest conversation ever, because we're sitting there going, oh, are you going to be here at the end of this film? Like, what's going to happen? You don't know. We have no idea. And the legend that she is, she agreed to have me document this, and I went to Dunedin a couple of times and we filmed her getting radiotherapy and all the changes in her body that go with that and the pain she was in and the vulnerability. And I asked her to film diary videos when I couldn't always be there, which actually feature quite heavily in the film because it's just her and her phone, and she's completely raw with what's going on. And there's a point where, because of her pain, they have to update up her medication, which means she cannot drive home. So now she's in another town undergoing this therapy and now can't see her family. And it was just brutal to make that film. Like every time filming with her, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, is this the last time I'm going to see you? Incredibly hard, but spoiler alert for this one, she's great. She had surgery, she had all the radiation. As many cancer survivors will know, it's unfortunately something that's still a risk for you in your body that she has to be aware of for the rest of her life. And that again goes back to why you make the films, and that was with the kind of support of the Cancer Society in New Zealand. So they have used it for a big fundraising campaign that they did, and Helene has done public talks now with the film, and it's done a tour. It's just on YouTube now because I wanted as many people to see it as possible. And people are genuinely getting or feeling supported and inspired is such an overused word, but it's helping people. And I think that's so great.
Yeah, no, it's a tough watch for sure. But in terms of her courage and her transparency and her rawness, and so I was thinking, well, okay, this is tough to watch. Like, imagine what it would be like making this. And no, I don't know her at all, but it's like you're working together, so you know this person, that you have an entirely different emotional investment in what's going on. And I'm sure getting those clips and seeing that where she's in Dunedin, I remember exactly that scene. It's like tough.
Yeah, and there were absolutely times where she's crying in front of camera and I'm trying to hold a camera steady because I'm blubbing behind the camera, just listening to what she's going through. And then, a few times you just got to put the camera down and just hug it out. Because it was, she's talking about not surviving. It doesn't really get any bigger than that, does it? it was huge. But again, I think I was the right person to make that because I can connect on that level. I don't know how it would have looked if someone else had tried filming that. Would she have opened up? I don't know. But I'm very grateful that she let me into that side of her world. Really am.
When you're sharing what you've learned about filmmaking, what's the thing that you most want people to leave with?
I don't ever see a finish line in what I do, and I'm learning every day. Every day I'm learning from like my friends, my other creative friends around me who do incredible work. Like they may say the same thing about, oh, that looks crap, or imposter syndrome, but I take something from those people and what they do, and I see it as a craft. I had a carpenter friend years ago talk to me, and he was really passionate about his craft, and he kept using the word craft. And I've kind of absorbed that into what I do, and that it's not a job per se. Like what I do, I see as a craft, because every kind of job I take on, whether it's documentary or commercial work or whatever it is another chance for me to improve myself. And that's probably built into, I guess, my bigger personality. If we go back and we were talking about me running up hills and wanting to push myself and always do better, I think it's just transferred into what I do now. So my advice, don't worry about where you are right now. Just keep moving in the direction that makes you happy. Would probably be my advice. Just try and, as hard as it is in this world, try and cut out the noise. Look at Instagram less.
You mentioned those different types of shoots. So you are, you go from the extremes of being solo in the backcountry for multiple days, humping everything yourself, to then being on a more commercial shoot with a bigger team around you, different things going on. How similar are those experiences from a creative perspective for you? And do you have a preference? Is there one side that, okay, this really brings out the best in me, or it's depends on the daily form?
Yeah, they're different, and there's pros and cons to both. When I take on a project that is, working directly with, let's just say, a brand, and from conception, to storyboarding, to creative ideas, to then scheduling, shooting, post-production, everything, that's great, because you have a lot more autonomy to work directly with the client. And are they happy? Are you happy? You can merge ideas. But with that, it can be quite isolating as well. Versus bigger crew, sometimes, depending on the job, you have to stay in your lane, which is part of how the industry works. You're a camera assistant for that day or that week, and that's your job. Your job isn't to go and do anything with lighting. You don't mess around with scripts, and that's just your job. So it's great to be around other people, and you still get that. For me, I still get that collaborative buzz. I love that, and you can still play a part, especially if you know the people in the project, and you can always have your input. But if you're on a bigger, more commercial studio shoot, the script is the script. Everything has been planned around you. So unless you're the director, you kind of stay in your lane and do what you're being paid to do. The nuance between those two places is something that I experienced last year, which was very cool. And there's a shoot with Apple TV, and they're creating a feature film, which is going to hopefully come out into this year. And that was working in the mountains, but I was hired to shoot the behind-the-scenes documentary of the making of. So I was surrounded by people on a big Hollywood budget set in the mountains, working with people who are like my filming idols. But yet, because I was shooting a behind-the-scenes documentary, I had actually all my autonomy. So it was actually like the absolute best of both worlds, that I could go and talk to anyone on set and film them and get the shots I wanted to get, and landscapes and establishing shots and details. And it was one of my favorite jobs to date.
I get the impression you frame the work prior to your film and photography as being things that were delaying you or delayed you to get to the point where you are now, as opposed to actually the things that made it all possible and that actually revealed that without them they wouldn't have perhaps revealed who you are. Do you think that's something that will come with time, that you will feel more comfortable with?
Yeah, I mean, again, who knows? Who knows what the future holds? Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? Because I'm so certain about what I do now, more certain than I've ever been in previous careers, that I guess I'm probably guilty of choosing to forget the, life part one. But you're right, I'm here because of my past, and my past has given me a certain skill set that not many people, well, no one has the same skill set as the person next to them, but I have a very different skill set to other people in my industry for sure. And I think leaning into that probably will take some time. I say it's only a couple of months ago that I had this conversation in Queenstown with a friend, and he opened that door in my mind to actually, you've got some skills and attributes here that you need to thank your past self for, rather than put it in a box and put it under the bed. So yeah, I think, and things like this, having this conversation about it, and there'll probably be conversations that spark off the back of this podcast with people, which will be really cool. And I'm always open to those chats, to get like deep and philosophical. It's cool. And yeah, I think so. Yeah, time will tell, but I'm more open to it than I probably ever have been in my life. Yeah.
I mean, nature and nurture. I mean, there's obviously always those elements, but I mean, it's like you're obviously a highly empathic person. Whether or not you would have those same degrees of empathy without what you'd experience in the police and search and rescue and all those other sorts of jobs and things that you've done and experienced, and seeing people at those absolute extremes and situations and dealing with them yourself as well. That's as I said, I don't think that if you'd gone through, I don't think you'd be the same. You might have got there faster with some of the technical skills, but there's a lot more around that, and particularly when it comes to story, it's like in terms of understanding people's story or understanding what the real story is here, rather than just looking at it from a purely technical perspective.
Yeah, God, it almost feels like a therapy session. I need to pay you after this, don't I? Yeah, you're right. You're 100% right. And I, as you were talking then, I had, flashes in my mind of places I'd been, in people's homes after, something terrible's happened. And yeah, those moments, because you are there on your own and you're seen as this kind of figure of responsibility or authority. I don't like the word authority. I think it sounds, like a power imbalance, but you're there to help, essentially, which, going back to the car crash, is what I did when it all went tits up. Is I went into a reflex to help people, to get them out of the car, to get them safe, to make the car was safe, and then collapsed. And I guess now, or then forward to the police, it's the same thing. It's always a cliche. Why did you join the police? Oh, I wanted to help people. But for me, my joining wasn't necessarily with that focus in mind. My joining was off the back of the car crash, which I guess was helping people, but the helping people just came organically through the process and connecting with people. And here I am now, wanting to tell more stories, and that involves connecting to people. So yeah, you're right. Yeah, like I said, therapy.
Well, I think there's a parallel universe, depending on your frame of reference at the time, but there's a parallel universe for you to be in that situation post-car crash, to have gone through that and to have gone, holy shit, these skills would be perfectly transferable to a film set, because it's all about immediacy and problem solving and knowing what to do when things go wrong, and so this would be great. And so you could have taken that path at that point, but I think you'd be a different filmmaker than you are now, having taken that the path that you've taken.
Yeah, I think it's just awareness as well. I mentioned earlier I was having a career conversation this week, and how, back in the day it was very like logically driven, but at no point did I ever consider, even though I was, taking photos and videos as a teenager, there was no, maybe it was my environment, but there was no connection to, oh, you can do this for a job. And I don't know why. And I've thought about that a lot. It's like, why did I not see that connection? Okay, so my school didn't have, we had drama class, but there was no photography, there was no filmmaking, anything like that. So was it my environment? Was it the fact that, we didn't have the internet back then, so you didn't know about these things outside of your town, your world? But then other people, knew as a kid they wanted to get into filmmaking, and they sought out the film school. So I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know why it never dawned on me. Maybe I was just, I don't know, being a overactive handful of a kid and didn't stop to consider it. I don't know.
I think that there is a lot around that frame of reference in terms of what, or the sphere of influence that is around you. I was the same as a kid. I loved the movies. I loved film. Never even occurred to me that working in film was a possibility, that this was actually a job. It wasn't until I was around like 23. It was, there's a film industry here that could have been a potential thing. But at that point, it was like I'd gone to university, I'd started my career in it, and I understood enough about the industry to know, okay, if you come in, you're still going to be the person running off to buy cigarettes and coffees for the rest of the crew or what have you. You've got to start at the bottom. And at that point, I was just like, oh, look, I'm not up to it. Looking back, it's just like, well, I was still pretty young. Maybe I should have done that. But it's interesting, I think, because as I said, there was no relevance, or I didn't know any actors or people that were in the industry, whereas perhaps if I had known that, then that maybe would have been a different career path.
Yeah, I agree. And living in Wanaka, and I guess I'm surrounded by my friends who are in that creative realm as well, that it seems obvious to me now. It's like, why the hell wouldn't you? But I don't know why it never happened.
You said that almost all of what you do now is equally challenging and exciting, which is pretty rare and special. Looking back to 17-year-old you, is there a piece of advice that you'd give yourself now? What would you say to him?
Yeah, take your foot off the gas would be the first one. It's so hard, isn't it? Because again, I'm reflecting on where I am now, and that's where I want to be. Yeah. And then I don't know. That's a biggie, because I wouldn't want to change where I am now, but also, I have a certain level of envy, I guess is the word, for people around me who have done this their whole life, because we only live a certain age. I'm like, oh, I could have spent the last 10 years before this doing what I love, and then I'd still be doing it, and be just as good or better. You can't have those regrets or those thoughts. Like, they're kind of fun to spitball, but I am who I am, and you can't go back, really. So I think just make sure that what you do from here onwards is what you want to do, and I guess that helps me with that drive, for sure, that I didn't get to do what I love for as long as I did in my past. And it's like, well, don't waste the future. Like, let's go.
There would potentially, though, then be a higher risk of being jaded or cynical. If you'd been in the industry for longer, you would have experienced more change in the industry, and probably not in a positive sense in terms of budgets getting smaller, fewer projects being produced, whatever it is, that then might be, you'd be perhaps not enjoying it, not finding it as challenging and as awesome as you're finding it now.
Yeah, and there you go. You mentioned earlier about the dual universes, side by side, and what would the other me look like? And quite possibly the industry has gone, even in the years that I've been doing, it has changed a lot, and it's obviously AI again is going to change more and more and more. But I built this from the ground up. Like, this was just me, and I've put blood, sweat and tears into this to get it to where it is now. And I think if I'd done that back then, I would have still put that same energy in. But yeah, things might have changed because how I've built it now is reflective of where we are in time. If that changes, then I can evolve with it. But I probably could have evolved before, but then I wouldn't have had the same experiences with connection to people and decision making that I got in my younger years.